There will be no interference. Prime Minister hits back at claims that the appointment of an acting Chief Justice could undermine judicial independence. Good evening and welcome to Primetime News on air and online at onespotmedia.com. I'm Archibald Gordon.
And I'm Doreen Samuels. Also this evening, unprecedented. PNP calls for permanent appointment of Chief Justice.
No comment. Acting Police Commissioner sidesteps media questions.
We are not blameless. PNP MP says government and opposition equally liable for escalating murders.
And in business news, take your time. NCB extends offer to purchase bigger stake in Guardian Holdings.
There's also a bite of the week, sports commentary and weather in this newscast. But before the break, the feedback question.
What do you make of the Prime Minister's decision to appoint the Chief Justice in an acting position?
Share comments online, facebook.com/television Jamaica, and tweet us at Television Jam.
Stay with us. Primetime News returns right after this break. Welcome back to Primetime News. Special welcome if you're watching on onespotmedia.com.
A reminder as well that you can watch TVJ live by downloading our One Spot Media app in the Google Play Store or the App Store. That's the number 1 followed by the word Spot and Media.
Up first this evening, Prime Minister Andrew Holness has hit back at critics who have chastised his statement as Thursday's appointment of Justice Brian Sykes as acting Chief Justice.
The Prime Minister in his statement seemingly placed Justice Sykes on probation in the role leading to concerns that the action could risk the independence of the judiciary.
But Mr. Holness stood his ground today, defending his action as he faced questions from the media on the matter and telling critics it's about accountability. TVJ's Kirk Wright reports.
At the swearing-in ceremony for Justice Brian Sykes on Thursday, Prime Minister Andrew Holness made this statement, which has been interpreted as him putting Justice Sykes on probation by appointing him in an acting role.
I'm confident that Justice Sykes will act in the role of Chief Justice, and very soon will fully assume the role of Chief Justice. Actions that brings results will determine the assumption of the role.
The statement caused raised eyebrows, some even questioning if the statement amounted to a lack of understanding on the Prime Minister's path for the separation of powers and the concept of the judiciary that is independent enough to make a decision without worrying if its members will be replaced by politicians not agreeing with their judgments. Today, at a tour of the Denham Town Zone of Special Operations, TVJ News asked the Prime Minister for clarification on his statement.
In the appointment of the Chief Justice, I was encouraged by the very people who are critical now to take an unconventional view. I followed that view. I interviewed after having gone through a process of shortlisting the Chief Justice. I have never met the person who I've selected as the Chief Justice. I have never had the opportunity to have a conversation with him. I can safely say I do not know him. And I selected someone based upon what is presented on paper as his resume and what I have researched as his work and what I have consulted with his peers.
The Prime Minister says Jamaica needs to get rid of the perception that accountability is woefully lacking. He says his statement signals a change from the traditional way of doing things simply because he wants to hold people account for their actions.
I am certain that the Chief Justice understands that I am a person who believes in systems of accountability. I am not intent on treading, trampling, or in any way interfering with the independence of the judiciary. But the judiciary is also accountable for how taxpayers' funds are spent. We want to see an improvement and strengthening in the rule of law and timely justice outcomes, and the Chief Justice will be accountable for this. I can't be any clearer.
The Prime Minister said this about those who have raised concern about his statement.
Those who want to criticize have the luxury of doing it. I have the luxury of running a country and being accountable to the taxpayers for the results of the systems that we are elected to run.
Kirk Wright, TVJ News.
In the meantime, the opposition People's National Party has joined in the cause of the legal fraternity for the appointment of Justice Brian Sykes as Chief Justice. Justice Sykes was appointed on Thursday to act in the position following the retirement of Zayla McCalla, who served as Chief Justice for 10 years. At a press briefing today, the PNP raised concern about what it deemed as possible political interference in the judiciary. TVJ's Janella Precious reports.
Justice Brian Sykes has been appointed to act as Chief Justice, but the verdict is still out on for how long. The Prime Minister suggesting at the swearing-in Thursday that Justice Sykes will have to prove himself if he is to be appointed permanently. For opposition leader Dr. Peter Phillips, this is tantamount to political interference in the affairs of the judiciary.
The Chief Justice is being asked during the period of his acting to pass some kind of test which is being set and marked by the Prime Minister. That puts pressure by implication, if not by intention, on the Chief Justice. In the 55 years of our independence, there has never been a circumstance such as this, where a Chief Justice has been appointed to act.
The opposition is also contending that it's not the first time the government has acted in this manner.
Quite frankly, it reminds me of those pre-signed letters to senators, where their duration in the Senate is determined by what decision they take. That is not a matter of guess or speculation. That has happened, and the courts have ruled that those were illegal, unlawful acts. And for that reason, we should be concerned when the Prime Minister is putting the Chief Justice on some sort of probation.
Questions are also being raised about the terms and conditions of the appointment.
We don't know the criteria. Is it going to continue for 3 years in an under-resourced justice system? Is it a pledge that he will resource this Chief Justice as no other has been resourced? Is it that he personally will evaluate him? And does that mean he has to do his bidding? In a democracy, these things are undesirable, and it is deeply regretted. In fact, it is untenable that any Chief Justice would have to be submitted to this level of, I've searched for a word that is elegant enough to use on television, but it's humiliating.
And so the opposition wants the government to make it right by appointing Justice Sykes fully as Chief Justice. Janella Precious, TVJ News.
And National Integrity Action, the NIA, has joined the call for Justice Brian Sykes to be appointed permanently in the role of the country's Chief Justice. In a release earlier today, the NIA called for Prime Minister Holness to explain why the appointment is a temporary one, adding that the action could appear to in fact risk the independence of the judiciary. Executive Director of the NIA, Professor Trevor Monroe, in the release also said that, quote, taking into account the extraordinary challenges currently facing Jamaica in the maintenance of law and order, as well as in raising levels of trust in critical institutions of the state, the Prime Minister should act promptly in resolving the Chief Justice's appointment as a matter of urgency, end quote.
The Jamaica Constabulary Force, JCF, is still not saying if Deputy Commissioner of Police Clifford Blake has been confirmed as the acting Commissioner of Police following last week's resignation of George Coelho. Today, TVJ News tried to get a response from DSP Blake, but he declined to comment. Meanwhile, acting head of the JCF's Corporate Communications Unit, Assistant Superintendent Dahlia Garrick, tried to give an explanation about some of the concerns raised about the transition to a new leader for the JCF. TVJ's Shamela Mitchell reports.
A relaxed Deputy Commissioner of Police, Clifford Blake, walked into the conference room at the Police Commissioner's office on Old Hope Road Friday morning. DSP Blake was there to witness the handing over of air conditioning units donated to the Jamaica Constabulary Force by the Chinese Embassy. The function, a day after concerns were raised about the transition to an interim commissioner in the aftermath of George Quayler's departure. DSP Blake at Friday's function spoke briefly, sometimes bringing the room into laughter.
And I just want to make sure I get it right. Newer Qingbao. Is that correct?
TVJ News requested an interview with Mr. Blake, but he told us he was advised not to speak to the media at this time. We were directed instead to the acting head of the JCF's Corporate Communications Unit, Assistant Superintendent Delia Garrick, who gave us this response.
Those are issues that would best be addressed by the Commissioner or the Police Services Commission.
Assistant Superintendent Garrick insists there is nothing wrong with Commissioner Quayler going into pre-retirement leave months ahead of his official departure.
You have your vacation leave, you would go on pre-retirement leave before leaving to utilize your days, and it's in keeping with the policies of the JCF.
Okay, so he won't demit office until after vacation?
He has demitted office. He will remain a member of the Jamaica Constabulary Force until August, when his retirement kicks in.
On Thursday, there were hints of confusion at the office of the police commissioner after it appeared George Quayler turned up a day after he was supposed to demit office. But Assistant Superintendent Garrick again sought to clarify.
It is not outside of the norm for you to properly brief and hand over, as it's a part of the accountability framework of the Jamaica Constabulary Force. So there was nothing untoward of Mr. Quayler and Mr. Blake having a meeting.
Shamala Mitchell, TVJ News.
A top story today, there will be no interference. Prime Minister hits back at claims that the appointment of an acting Chief Justice could undermine judicial independence. Still ahead this evening, we are not blameless. PNP MP says government and opposition equally liable for escalating murders. And in business news, take your time. NCB extends offer to purchase bigger stake in Guardian Holdings. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, continuing the news. The St. Andrew police were busy today as gunmen went on a rampage, killing one person and leaving another man injured. One incident went down along Lady Musgrave Road, where a businessman, Uriel James, was shot and injured. A team from private security firm King Alarm apprehended the attackers. While in the community of Swallowfield, a man identified as Rowan Masters was murdered. TVJ's Kalisha Williams reports.
Customers at the Spartan Gym along Lady Musgrave Road in St. Andrew were in for a surprise when gunmen struck on Friday. This amateur video obtained by our newsroom is the scene of the shooting, which took place sometime after 8 this morning. It was a busy Friday morning along Lady Musgrave Road, an area heavily trafficked. And based on our investigations, several customers have been moving to and from the gym. Luckily, only one person was injured as members of a private security company intercepted the two attackers. The team is from private security firm King Alarm, who people are calling Good Samaritans. TVJ News understands that businessman Uriel James was in his silver Honda Civic in the parking lot of the gym when two men approached the vehicle and started shooting. Heroics were on display, as it is believed that Mr. James managed to drive himself to a medical facility while injured. Eyewitnesses say the men were dressed in construction gear. The security team managed to apprehend the men until the police arrived. The police say they recovered a Ruger pistol, a Glock pistol, and 22 rounds of ammunition from the gunmen. Meanwhile, hours later, more shooting, this time in the community of Swallowfield. Gunmen struck minutes after noon. However, the victim, Rowan Masters, otherwise called Slabber Dog, was not as lucky as Uriel James. It is believed that Masters is a former member of the Joel Andem Gideon warrior gang. He was described by the police high command as a contract killer. Reports indicate Masters was walking along the road after reporting on condition of bail when he was attacked and shot. He died in hospital. Masters was convicted in 2003 for the murder of gas station operator Sylvia Edwards and sentenced to life imprisonment. The appeal court later quashed his conviction and ordered a retrial. Mrs. Edwards was kidnapped and killed in July 2000 by members of the Joel Andem gang. Mr. Masters was freed at retrial and was waiting for a trial for a 2009 drive-by shooting in Portmore, St. Catherine. Kalisha Williams, TVJ News.
There are mixed reactions to the state of emergency in St. James. This admission from members of the opposition who toured sections of the parish to get reactions from residents and the business community. Opposition spokesman on national security Fitz Jackson and opposition spokesman on justice Senator Donna Scott Motley say so far they're satisfied with the feedback they've received.
Generally, the residents are satisfied of the behavior and attitude of the security force in dealing with them. Some of the business persons we have spoken with indicated that while they welcome the pause in the criminal activities in the area, the restriction on the level of business transactions is severely hurting them. And in case of some of the food outlets, they wouldn't mind if another hour or two could be extended on the time beyond the 7 o'clock to the 9 o'clock.
I was very concerned about the reports I was receiving that there were over 400 detainees and the conditions under which they were being held. In our briefing this morning, Colonel Price was able to give us all the statistics and the data, and we have been told that there are only 7 persons presently in detention. That is a good thing.
Mr. Jackson says he'll be relaying the residents' feedback to the police. Meanwhile, he adds that the residents have a bigger concern.
After the state of emergency, what happens after Zozo? Because we all know that the state of emergency is a temporary measure and the most extreme that the government can take. We believe that intervention could have occurred before in a more pointed way, where the investigative skills and competencies of the security, together with the military muscle that may be needed, could have come in before declaring a state of emergency. But the government never take our recommendations as forcefully as we try to make them. But we are where we are now.
Member of the opposition People's National Party, Dr. Fenton Ferguson, is defending the National Security Minister Robert Montague, who has come in for strong criticism with the crime situation spiralling out of control. Dr. Ferguson says both political parties are to be blamed. TVJ Shamela Mitchell reports.
With over 1,000 murders committed in 2017 and more than 100 since the start of the year, member of the opposition People's National Party, Dr. Fenton Ferguson, says there is no doubt the country is bleeding. However, he does not think the National Security Minister, Robert Montague, should be blamed.
There is no doubt that what is taking place cannot be allowed to continue. There's absolutely no doubt that with what has happened in 2017 and the trend we have seen, Minister, in 2018, I personally believe it is unfair that the burden of all of this could be placed at the feet of the minister.
Dr. Ferguson says in his view, he believes that all Jamaicans should take responsibility.
And it is not fair either to put it at the feet of a commission. Because while leadership is always important, whether at the ministerial level or at the level of the JCF or the Jamaica Defense Force, the fact is that where we are now has taken us decades, both administration, to get here.
Despite being in opposing political parties, Dr. Ferguson says he maintains a good relationship with Minister Montague. He says now is not the time to play politics. The interests of the country must be priority.
Jamaica is our country, We can't be talking about Jamaica land we love, and at the political level we continue to be tribalist and divided, especially on matters of crime, health, and education.
Shamala Mitchell, TVJ News.
And the People's National Party PNP General Secretary Julian Robinson issued a statement Thursday evening to clarify what Dr. Ferguson had said when he made the comments in St. Thomas on Tuesday. In the release, Mr. Robinson said, quote, "There is nothing that absolves the present Minister of National Security, Robert Montague, and the Holness Cabinet from the policy failures of the past 2 years, which have led to an out-of-control murder rate, widespread fear, and a rundown and demotivated Jamaica Constabulary force," end quote. The statement added that, quote, "It was this policy failure which led to a comprehensive review at the Shadow Cabinet retreat 2 weeks ago," end quote. This failure, he said, was squarely at the feet of the entire Holness administration. The St. Thomas Eastern Member of Parliament says to put the matter beyond the peradventure of doubt, he said, quote, "The PNP also accepts it also has a significant role, but emphasizes that the JLP government must take responsibility because of its command of the information and resources of the state," end quote.
The police in St. Thomas have broken their silence on how they are managing the crime situation in that parish. Head of the Area 5 Police, Assistant Commissioner Derek Knight, is also seeking to assure residents that the cops are relentless in their efforts to make the parish safe again. Since the start of the year, the parish has seen a 4-fold increase in murders when compared to the same period last year. TVJ Shamela Mitchell reports.
The parish of St. Thomas has recorded 8 murders since the start of the year, compared to 2 during the corresponding period last year. The parish also ended 2017 with 21 murders, as it did in 2016. The murders have been relatively low when compared to other parishes. On Wednesday, one businessman expressed the view that the parish is no longer safe and accused the police of not doing enough to fix the crime problem. It's a concern too for chairman of the St. Thomas Parish Council, Mayor Lenworth Rawle.
Once would I hear that Montego Bay is right here now in St. Thomas.
But the parish's chief crime officer, Detective Inspector Samuel Barnes, says based on investigation so far, 5 of the 8 murders that took place appear to have stemmed from domestic disputes.
I think the double and triple, we can say it's mostly disputes, not gun related, but even the triple, we believe that it's mostly disputes, because there was the theories that there was disputes between the deceased and other persons that we are looking into at this moment.
And despite the limited resources, the police have still managed to beef up security by doing more foot patrols. Mr. Barnes says specific areas including Bull Bay, Church Corner and Seafort are being targeted at this time. Head of the Area 5 Division, Assistant Commissioner of Police Derek Knight, says in 2014 the parish recorded 15 murders, and so the aim is not to exceed that this year.
I can assure the community that the division and by extension the management of Area 5 is paying special attention and giving the type of investigative support that is needed in all the matters reported so far.
Shamela Mitchell, TVJ News.
Before the break, it's time for our feedback responses, and Archie is at the smartboard.
Thanks, Doreen. Here's a question this evening asking, what do you make of the Prime Minister's decision to appoint the Chief Justice in an acting position? Claren Holness says the Prime Minister did nothing wrong. The Constitution allowed for the appointment of acting judges and Chief Justice. People in every sector have been placed in acting position. The Chief Justice is no exception. Cutie says that's a $1 million move. It doesn't make any difference to me at all. The judicial system needs some sterilization to rid some of the microbes within it. Alex Brown says, well, if he's reliable and qualified enough to act and the position is vacant, what's the acting for? Is the position a movie role? Appoint him. And finally, Keneal Cole says, I don't see anything wrong with what the Prime Minister did. Life's a stage and we are all actors. Keep your comments coming on Facebook and Twitter. Facebook.com/Television Jamaica and your tweets to @Television Jam. The Financial Week, news from overseas and or bite of the week. They're all next. Please stay tuned.